Legacy storage. Your computer boots in 90 seconds. Applications take forever to open. Files drag across your screen like they're moving through molasses. Welcome to the hard disk drive experience, where physics decided to ruin your day. A mechanical hard drive, or HDD, stores data on rotating magnetic platters. Think of it like a record player, except instead of music, it's hunting for your spreadsheet while spinning at either 5,400 or 7,200 revolutions per minute. The faster spin speed matters, but not as much as you'd hope. A 7,200 RPM drive pushes around 80 to 160 megabytes per second. A 5,400 RPM drive is slower, usually maxing out around 100 megabytes per second. Either way, you're waiting. The problem isn't just speed, it's latency. Every time your system needs data, a physical read-write head has to swing across the platter to find it. That head weighs almost nothing, but it's still governed by the laws of motion. It accelerates, decelerates, repositions itself thousands of times per second. Each movement takes milliseconds, and those milliseconds add up when your operating system is pulling files from 47 different locations just to open a web browser. Hard drives were designed in an era when CPUs were slow enough that storage could keep up. That era ended around 2010. Modern processors can execute billions of instructions per second. Your hard drive is still mechanically seeking data at the same speed it did 20 years ago. The mismatch is absurd. Then there's fragmentation. As you use a hard drive, files get broken into chunks and scattered across the platter. Your operating system maintains a map of where everything lives, but that doesn't change the fact that opening a single document might require the read head to jump around 12 different physical locations. On a 7,200 RPM drive, the platter completes one full rotation every 8 milliseconds. If your file is fragmented badly enough, you could be waiting 50 to 100 milliseconds just for the drive to gather all the pieces. Multiply that across every file your system touches during boot, and you can see why it takes a minute and a half. The 7,200 RPM drive is technically faster, but in real-world use, the difference between it and a 5,400 RPM drive is barely noticeable. Both are bottlenecked by seek time, the delay caused by physical movement. You're not moving data faster by spinning the platter quicker if the redhead still has to physically hunt for every file fragment. Hard drives made sense when they were the only option. Now, they're just the cheapest way to store large amounts of data you rarely access. For anything your computer actually needs to run, they're a relic. Solid-state storage and the SATA ceiling. Solid-state drives fix the mechanical problem by eliminating movement entirely. No platters, no spinning, no read-write head doing laps across a magnetic surface. Just NAND flash memory, which stores data electronically in silicon chips. The performance jump is immediate and dramatic. A SATA solid-state drive can push 550 megabytes per second. That's roughly 5 times faster than a mechanical hard drive. And more importantly, it does it without latency. When your system asks for data, the drive responds almost instantly. There's no seek time, no waiting for a platter to rotate into position. Files load in fractions of a second. Boot times drop from 90 seconds to 15. Applications open before you finish clicking them. But here's the catch. SATA itself is the bottleneck. The SATA interface was developed for hard drives, specifically designed around a technology called Advanced Host Controller Interface, or AHCI. AHCI dates back to 2004, when mechanical drives were the standard and nobody imagined storage could be faster than the bus connecting it to the motherboard. The SATA 3 standard, which is what most systems use, caps out at 600 megabytes per second theoretical maximum. In practice, you get around 550. For a hard drive pushing 120 megabytes per second, SATA is fine. For a solid-state drive capable of much more, SATA is a ceiling you hit immediately. The drive wants to go faster, but the interface won't let it. SATA also limits how the drive communicates with the system. AHCI allows one command queue with up to 32 commands. A command queue is exactly what it sounds like, a line of instructions waiting to be executed. When your system needs data, it sends commands to the storage drive. Those commands get in line, and the drive processes them one by one. 32 commands sounds reasonable until you realize modern solid-state drives are capable of handling thousands of operations simultaneously. AHCI wasn't built for that. The other problem is overhead. AHCI was optimized for spinning disks, which are slow by nature. It includes extra steps and processes that made sense when latency was measured in milliseconds. On a solid-state drive, where latency is measured in microseconds, those extra steps just waste time. The CPU has to manage more than it should, slowing everything down. So SATA solid-state drives are fast, but only within the limits of an outdated interface. You'll notice the upgrade from a hard drive immediately. Your system feels responsive, programs open quickly, but you're still not getting the full capability of flash memory. The drive is constrained by a 20-year-old communication protocol that wasn't designed for it. This is why SATA solid-state drives feel like a massive upgrade but still leave performance on the table. The storage technology evolved, the interface didn't. High-speed storage and the NVMe revolution. NVMe stands for Non-Volatile Memory Express, and it's a communication protocol built specifically for solid-state drives. Unlike AHCI, which was designed for hard drives and then awkwardly adapted for SSDs, NVMe was engineered from the ground up to take full advantage of flash memory. The difference is substantial. NVMe doesn't use the SATA bus. It uses PCI Express, the same high-speed interface your graphics card plugs into. PCI Express, or PCIe, operates through lanes. Each lane is a dedicated pathway for data transfer. An NVMe drive typically uses 4 lanes, written as PCIe times 4. The bandwidth available depends on the generation of PCIe your system supports. PCIe Generation 3, or Gen 3, provides roughly 1,000 megabytes per second per lane. With 4 lanes, that's around 4,000 megabytes per second total bandwidth. In practice, NVMe Gen 3 drives hit about 3,500 megabytes per second for sequential reads. That's over 6 times faster than SATA. PCIe Generation 4 doubles the bandwidth per lane to approximately 2,000 megabytes per second. 4 lanes deliver around 8,000 megabytes per second, with real-world NVMe Gen 4 drives reaching 7,000 megabytes per second. Generation 5 doubles it again, pushing theoretical speeds up to 14,000 megabytes per second. The performance gap between generations is real, but it's not always noticeable in typical use. Gen 3 is already fast enough that most people won't feel the difference upgrading to Gen 4 unless they're moving enormous files regularly. Generation 5 is overkill for anything except professional video editing or large-scale data transfers. NVMe also solves the command queue limitation. AHCI allowed 1 queue with 32 commands. NVMe allows 64,000 queues, with each queue capable of holding 64,000 commands. That's over 4 billion possible commands in theory. In practice, no consumer workload will ever come close to maxing that out. But the point is that NVMe can handle parallel operations on a scale AHCI never could. This matters because modern operating systems don't just request one file at a time. They're constantly pulling data from dozens of locations simultaneously. Windows might be loading your desktop, checking for updates, indexing files, and syncing cloud storage all at once. NVMe handles that chaos efficiently. AHCI struggles. NVMe also reduces CPU overhead. The protocol is streamlined, with fewer steps between the system and the storage. The processor spends less time managing the drive and more time doing actual work. Latency drops further, input-output operations per second increase, and the whole system feels more responsive. The physical connection is different too. NVMe drives use the M2 form factor, a small rectangular card that slides directly into the motherboard. No SATA cables, no separate power connectors, just a single screw holding it in place. It's cleaner, simpler, and faster. NVMe is what happens when storage technology finally gets an interface designed for its capabilities instead of being shackled to legacy standards. Real-world usage and what actually happens. Your boot drive does more work than any other component in your system. The moment you press the power button, it's being hammered with requests. The BIOS hands off to the bootloader. The bootloader pulls the operating system kernel. The kernel loads drivers. Drivers initialize hardware. Background services spin up. Startup programs queue. Security software scans. The entire process involves thousands of small, random file reads scattered across the drive. This is why boot time is the single most noticeable metric when upgrading storage. A hard drive takes 90 seconds because it's physically seeking each file. A SATA SSD drops that to 15 seconds because there's no seek time. An NVMe drive might shave another few seconds off, but the improvement is less dramatic because you've already eliminated the biggest bottleneck, which was mechanical latency. Once the system is running, the operating system's access patterns become the dominant factor. Windows doesn't read files linearly. It constantly jumps between system directories, user folders, application data, and temporary files. Even something as simple as opening File Explorer triggers dozens of background reads. Thumbnail generation, metadata indexing, recent file tracking, cloud sync checks. Each of those operations is a separate random read. High IOPS and low latency matter here more than sequential speed. Application load behavior follows a similar pattern. When you launch a program, the system pulls the executable, loads libraries, checks dependencies, reads configuration files, and initializes resources. All of this happens in parallel, scattered across the drive. A program might only be 200 megabytes installed, but loading it could involve accessing 500 different files. SATA handles this fine. NVMe handles it faster, but the difference is milliseconds, not seconds. Games are where storage speed starts to matter more visibly, specifically for asset streaming. Modern games don't load everything into RAM up front. They stream textures, models, and audio dynamically as you move through the world. A hard drive will cause stuttering and pop-in because it can't keep up. A SATA SSD eliminates most of that. NVMe improves it further, especially in games designed with fast storage in mind. But many older titles were built assuming hard drives and don't benefit much. The new generation of games built for consoles with NVMe storage, like PlayStation 5 titles ported to PC, can actually leverage faster drives. Load times shrink, texture streaming smooths out. But these are the exception, not the rule. Most games still don't saturate even a SATA SSD during gameplay. Background read and write processes are the silent performance killers. Windows Update downloads in the background, antivirus scans files, cloud storage syncs, indexing services catalog your drive, browser cache writes, temp files accumulate. All of this happens while you're trying to work, and all of it competes for storage bandwidth. A hard drive crumbles under this load. Everything slows to a crawl because the drive can only do one thing at a time. A SATA SSD handles it without breaking a sweat because it can process multiple operations simultaneously. NVMe improves responsiveness further, but again, the jump from SATA to NVMe is smaller than the jump from HDD to SATA. The pattern is clear. Storage speed eliminates waiting, but only up to a point. The biggest gains come from moving off mechanical drives. After that, you're optimizing, not transforming. Perception versus reality and the real bottleneck. You buy a high-end processor, 32 gigabytes of RAM, a dedicated graphics card, and your computer still feels slow, not during gaming or video rendering, but during normal use. Opening folders, launching browsers, switching between programs. The system hesitates. Loading icons spin for half a second too long. Everything feels slightly sluggish, like the computer is thinking before it acts. The culprit is almost always storage. A fast CPU doesn't matter if it's waiting on a slow drive to feed it data. RAM doesn't help if the system has to pull files from a mechanical hard drive first. Your processor can execute billions of instructions per second, but if those instructions depend on data that takes 50 milliseconds to retrieve, the CPU just sits there doing nothing. This is the real bottleneck problem. Modern systems are built around the assumption that storage is fast. Operating systems preload data aggressively. Applications expect instant file access. Background services assume they can read and write without impacting performance. When you pair a capable CPU with a hard drive, the entire system becomes unbalanced. The processor is starved for data, and everything else waits in line behind the storage bottleneck. Upgrading from a hard drive to any SSD, even a budget SATA model, eliminates this mismatch. The system suddenly feels twice as fast because the storage can finally keep up with the processor. Boot times drop. Applications open instantly. Multitasking becomes smooth. File operations that used to freeze the system for seconds now complete in the background without interruption. This is why upgrading storage feels like getting a new computer. You're not actually making the CPU faster or adding more RAM. You're removing the constraint that was holding everything back. The processor was always capable of running your programs quickly. It was just waiting on the hard drive to deliver the data it needed. The jump from SATA SSD to NVMe is real, but it's incremental. You'll notice it in specific tasks: moving large files, loading enormous projects, streaming high-resolution game assets. For general use, browsing, office work, and casual gaming, the difference is there but subtle. SATA was already fast enough to keep up with most workloads. NVMe just pushes the ceiling higher for those who need it. The perception that a new computer is faster often has nothing to do with the CPU or RAM. It's because the new machine came with an SSD, and your old one had a hard drive. Storage is the component most people underestimate and the upgrade that delivers the most immediate, noticeable improvement. Your CPU isn't slow. Your RAM isn't the problem. Your hard drive is strangling your system, and replacing it changes everything. The performance was always there. You just needed storage fast enough to unlock it. Speaking of unlocking your system's potential, If you want to squeeze even more speed out of your setup, check out why USB port colors actually matter.